Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Q Project workshop. This is our Cybersecurity Cybertruck Edition series. And tonight I'm going to be doing a workshop about data breaches. And then I'm going to talk about the Cellion data breach. And if you're part of the UC, like what you can do to move on from it and protect your information. So an overview of like the 5 topics I'll be doing is I'm first going to talk about the data breach itself, or not the data breach. I'm just going to talk about data breaches in general, what they are, and then prevention and mitigation of them for companies. And then I'm going to go into the UC breach and all of that. So first off, what is a data breach? It's a security incident where data is accessed without authorization. Most people hear this as information like your name, your phone number, social security numbers, emails, but it can also be a lot of other information. But these are some of the main ones and the ones that people look for since they can be used for identity theft. The average cost for a company that's involved with a data breach is 3.86 million. I've seen other numbers. Some people say it's 7 million, 5 million, but you can basically assume that if your company has a data breach, you're going to be spending more than $1 million trying to handle that. And the average cost from researchers is about $148 per stolen record. So this is why there's so much incentive, because by just getting one single record of one person's name or their email and social security, that hacker could make about $150 off of that. And that's really good incentive if you find a large company that has thousands of users or millions of users. And so when it comes to data breaches, it's never about if it's going to happen, it's when. So if you're a small business, these are determined to be the companies that are most at risk for data breaches. And the reason for this is mostly just because they don't think that they're big enough to be targeted. They assume that having a small company prevents people from targeting them. But we'll get into reasons why this isn't true, such as if you're using third-party vendors, they can be at risk, and your own company's not at risk. And the other reason for this is that most of the time they just don't have the revenue to be able to handle it. They have a certain amount of budget for the year. They need to pay their employees. They need to handle their businesses. And they just see security as the last step that they need to do. If they don't have the money for it, they don't invest into it, which is never usually a good idea. And on the Semantic Security Threat Report, I believe this one was from 2018, it showed that 87% of small businesses or small and medium-sized businesses did not think they were at risk of a data breach, even though they're determined to be the highest risk. And so if you split up the different types of data breaches, you can put it into about 5 different categories. The first one would be hacks. This is things like phishing, ransomware, card skimming, and these are the most common ones you hear if you hear people trying to steal data. But there's also things like employee error. This would be if an employee accidentally publishes private information on a website, or they accidentally send private information through like an unencrypted channel. This is about 30% of all the incidents of data breaching, and I believe that's for the United States. And then the accidental exposure is the third type, and that's about 7% of incidents. This is where it's not an actual employee causing the data breach by mishandling information or not following guidelines. It's when like the company itself or like some outside accidental thing ends up exposing data. Say there's like a glitch in your website and no one was touching it, but then it just happens to display personal information on the home screen. You would need to go in and fix it. Obviously, it's a data breach, but employee might not have been behind it. The fourth type of data breach is physical theft. This isn't very common anymore because you could imagine no one's going to be running into a business looking for a server to steal, because most people nowadays have their business information on cloud services of that such. So it's hard to steal data from a physical location. You need to know a lot of detail. It's much easier to just hack them from a remote location or to try and fish and do all that. And then the last type of data or the last type of data breach is the third party subcontractors. This is if your company's utilizing a third party, they can be at risk without your own company being at risk. And if you're providing data to that third party and they have a data breach, your customer's data is going to be leaked and you're going to have to handle that even though it wasn't your fault necessarily. And the reason this is bolded is because this is the topic for a Cellion and what happened on that couple months ago. So if you're looking at preventing data breaches, you could say that among cybersecurity experts, prevention is the best way of handling a data breach. You don't want the data breach to happen in the first place because, like I mentioned, there's tons of costs involved with it, and it's just not worth it for any company. It's much better to pay for security ahead of time instead of trying to pay for legalities and civil lawsuits and all that. So the first thing you can do is make sure that all your customers' data or your clients' data, company data, is encrypted and that people have multi-factor authentication. Some companies still don't do this, but it's at this point you shouldn't be not encrypting data or you shouldn't not be using multi-factor. It's pretty simple to have multi-factor where it sends a text to your employees and they can verify their identity that way. So you want to ensure that everyone's authorized that's accessing company data. The other best way to prevent data breaches is to have 24/7 monitoring. You don't have to do this in your own company. You can hire security operation centers. Their whole goal is to take in clients and monitor their data 24/7 and monitor their networks 24/7 to ensure there's no data breaches. It's going to cost you money to like you're going to have to obviously pay these companies, but this is the best route to go if you don't want to do it in-house. But if you want to do it in-house, you can either train employees or you can hire new employees. Both of these are going to cost you money, but you can see that in general it's money either way. It's money to secure ahead of time and prevent or money because you had a breach. And another note is that new vulnerabilities are always coming out. So you shouldn't just train your employees once and expect that that's good enough. You should probably be doing it at least once or twice a year, updating them on the newest technology so that they're aware of it. And so, say prevention doesn't work, say your company was already breached, then you need to go into mitigation. And so, if you're a business, there's five or not, they're not really simple, but there's 5 steps that you can take to ensure that the data breach goes smoothly. The first one is you need to ensure you have a whole expert team. You need to have people that can handle the technical side, such as fixing the servers, making sure no other data is leaked. But then you also need the people for legal work so that you're not getting sued by customers and people and investors. And then you also need HR so that they can go out and speak to your customers and your investors and tell them what the company's doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again or that the information that wasn't leaked is still safe. The second thing you need to do is you should go to the physical location of the breach. Most of the time, they'll turn the servers off if it's necessary to prevent any extra data being stolen. And then you can go in momentarily and try and block everything off, get rid of users that might look suspicious, make sure there's no new logins that aren't suspicious. And then you can turn servers back on once you deemed that everything is safe. The third thing you can do is you need to go online and check websites and sources because most of the time, random websites or search engines are going to cache data because that's their whole point. So you need to go to search engines and tell them, hey, this data was leaked. It's not supposed to be out. You need to remove it from your cache. And most of them will remove it to ensure that the data doesn't get out to the wrong hands. And on the technical side, for the fourth step, is you need to remove the vulnerability. This goes after you've seen the breach and you've started to remove the data, protect data that wasn't lost. Then you need to go in and find the problem and fix the problem to ensure that nothing else happens. And then the last step is communication. Some companies decide to hide the extent of a data breach, which is never a good thing because once people find out how bad it is, you lose a lot of customers and then you get into a lot of lawsuits because people begin suing because you lied to them. So the best step is not to hide a data breach, it's to be outright flat about it without trying to undermine your company, but to just point out that it happened and let everyone know what you're doing and the steps that you're taking, as well as most of the time you need to inform law enforcement in some way so that they have it on record. And so moving on just from like data breaches in general, I'm going to talk about what happened in the last few months with the Cellion and the UC system in California. So a Cellion, it's a Cellion file transfer appliance or FTA, and they're a third-party vendor that the UC system's using, and a bunch of government agencies and private companies are also using it because it's a nice way of transferring protected information. The issue was that they had some security exploits and hackers used this to steal a bunch of data from the transfer protocol. Basically, as information was transferring, they were able to get in and steal data. So what Acelion had to do, and this was part of mitigation, was they hired this security team Mandiant to go in and do a security assessment of the whole company to make sure that so they could figure out what happened, what caused it, and if there was anything else that could cause any issues in the future. Mandiant found that there were two zero-day vulnerabilities that were a part of the Acelion file transfer system, and these were responsible for the two exploits that happened in December and January a few months ago, where data was stolen. And these exploits were allowing for authenticated or unauthenticated remote code execution. Basically, these hackers were able to access a Cellion and put code into their system without having authorization that would then spit back a bunch of user data. And this is how the UC files were stolen. These individuals copied and transferred UC files that were being transferred back to them. And then they took this data and they put it on this hacker website called Clop. And Clop, it wasn't just used for this data, it's been used in the past for other hacks, but it's mostly a ransomware website. They'll publish bits of the data and then they'll say, look, we have the data, we want money, or we're going to put the rest of it up on this website. So currently, I don't know currently how much data is on Clop that was from the UC, but I'm sure that some of it has been leaked on there currently. So some people have already had their information compromised. And I believe Clop is a website that's on the dark web because when I look it up on like Google and DuckDuckGo and all that, you don't see much information about it. And this here is just a screenshot I took from the Mandiant security assessment. It was like a 8-page report they made. And here you can see that they made a little table of the exploits they found that caused the breach. And for those that have been around the Q project for a while, you'll see that SQL injection, command injection, the server side request forgery, these are all topics that we've covered in the past. And so you can see that in action, this is what happened. Cellion was hacked due to SQL and command injections to some of their documents that were not secured. And this is how tons of data was leaked. But you can also see here on the right, it says remediated for all of them. That basically meant that when Mandiant found this, they talked to Cellion, and Cellion patched all these and fixed it to make sure this wouldn't happen again. So they declared that this was fixed, that the issue won't come again. At least these exploits won't come again. And so for those of you at the University of California, if this is your, I'm sure this might not be your first time hearing about it because there's a bunch of emails going out. But if it is, you should visit this website. Or if you're not at UC Merced, you should visit another website for your university because they'll give you free identity theft monitoring and all that to try and make up for what happened. And that goes into the cost of data breaches. The UC had to pay out money for identity theft for all of the people in their system, as well as all these other government agencies and companies had to do the same for their people. And for those that aren't part of the UC system, but you think that your company was at risk from a Cellion, you should check to see if it is. Check your emails and see if anything came about. And if you're really paranoid about it, you can just go ahead and put a fraud alert on your credit card accounts. You can, if you put it on one, it's going to be a fraud alert for all three of these credit bureaus. And with that, that's the end of my workshop. So thank you. I'll answer any questions right now if there are any. If not, here's my sources. So I'll just wait a moment for any questions. And if not, we'll end today's workshop.
Did you ever find the tour link for club?
I didn't go and look for it, but yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering. I have no other questions.
Okay. All right, then. Well, if there isn't any other questions, thank you all for coming. I hope this was informative. So thank you. Have a good day.
Please like and subscribe.
Yes, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And go look at our other videos if you want to know more about SQL injection and command injection and all that.